move on to next presentation. Rajni Bakshi, welcome. Rajni is from Mumbai, India, working now as a fellow, Gandhi Peace Fellow at the think tank called Gateway House, and she has been very important writer for the movements that she has been documenting and publishing a lot of movements. And a few years back wrote an important book, Bazaars and Markets. So markets, you can tell the full name, and it's even for sale. I saw some copies over there. So then there's a chance to get to know Rajni's thinking even more than in the next 5-7 minutes.
5 minutes. Great. Thank you, Marco. And really lovely to be here. It's been a lovely time deep inside the comfort zone. So I just wanted to share that with all of you, that it's been a total delight to be here. So the conversation of the book that Marco just referred to is Bazaars, Conversations and Freedom. And I think I used my 5-6 minutes to try to address this question from that perspective. Basically, the title of the book, it's a longer or more elaborate form, is that bazaars are conversations about freedom. Not just the freedom to buy and sell, but the freedom firstly to meet, to gather as collectives and as individuals, and exchange firstly ideas, starting with perhaps the purpose of life. And the reason why I came to this title was that in the year 1999, I set out to ask a very basic question, I mean really a kind of kindergarten level question, that what is this market? And the question came to me for the following reason. I was involved in struggles for people's control, local people's control over their natural resources for about 20 years, from about 82, 83 onwards, both documenting them as a journalist and also trying to support in some small way. And by 1999 in India, a very diverse range of these activist groups and movements agreed on one thing. I mean, there were many different ideologies, many disagreements, but one thing we could agree on, that Jal, Jungle, Jameen, Logon ke haath, which means land, forest and water, must be in the hands of the local community. And I had been, shouting this slogan, writing along these lines for 15 years. And then in about 1998, it struck me that if the larger market system doesn't change, actually this slogan would not only be shallow and hollow, but it could actually land the very people we were trying to fight for in a much worse situation. Because if the larger system remains untouched, then it would be far easier for an Enron. That was the last big controversy many of us had been involved in. There was a company called Enron. And there was a resistance against a gas-based power plant that they were constructing. That if you don't have any change in the larger picture, it's far easier, far cheaper for an Enron just to buy 5 people at the village committee. How will we ensure that, who is this people, even at the village level? So, beyond a certain point, it's a myth. Unless there is in fact a community structure. And a community structure that has a notion of what is sustainability, etc., etc. And all that takes a lot of doing. So that's how I set out to study what is the market, and I came to 2-3 basic conclusions, which, since I have only 3 minutes left, one, that every society that ever moved beyond hunting and gathering has had a bazaar. Ever since our ancestors stopped somewhere to cultivate, we have had exchange in some form. But it's very interesting that some form or the other of reciprocal exchange precedes monetized or commodity exchange by 4,000 years. That is, to me, a fascinating detail. It takes 4,000 years of settled agriculture before the first commodity exchange comes into the picture. And even then, it exists side by side with gift exchange for another 3,500 years. The first fixed shops appear in Greece and in India, perhaps even in China, around the same time, roughly between 6 and 700 BC. That's around the same time that the first forms of money, as in coin money, appear. I mean, there's other forms of exchange. I mean, tokens of exchange before that. So to cut a long story short, my basic submission is that we need to make a distinction between commerce and capitalism. Commerce is very ancient, and in the Indian, and I would say from the Middle East to the China, we have the advantage that we are living in a tradition of unbroken commerce. In the West, after the collapse of the Roman Empire, your market systems collapsed completely, they vanished, because the economy shrank into the feudal manors and the monasteries. And then they were revived. Your very city here, Leipzig, is an example of one of the first places where the big market fairs began to be revived. I think here it's 11th century or something. So, basically my appeal is that we need to understand this history much better, not because there is any call to go backwards, but because if we understand the diversity of knowledge, wisdom and experience that we have in the past with different forms of exchange, how all of them pretty much uninterrupted till about 1700, till about the time of Adam Smith, they are all embedded in social mores. There is no bazaar till the modern times that is not embedded in society, with society deciding its terms of reference, society deciding what are the norms within which it will operate. And the big difference between bazaar and market is that market is disembedded from society. Now I know that this gets me into a lot of trouble in some circles, and people say this is a very arbitrary division, etc. So I'll ask you to bear with me on that. Basically, the bazaar is what you and I can engage with even today in parts of rural India. It's spontaneous, it's organic, it is money related, it's not demonetized, but it is embedded in a social structure. And the market is what you and I can go and do just now. We can play on the, on Wall Street, buy and sell shares and everything that comes from it. And capitalism really is a creature of this modern market. And so that's basically my submission. I'd be happy to come back later during the Q&A. Or do you want to do Q&A now?
Yeah, if you can hang on. So any reactions on those distinctions? The book is on the first bookshop on the first floor.
Oh, that was a sly commercial.
I propose 6 weeks for another 2 minutes.
Okay.
On how to get there.
Okay.
What you have heard for last days here.
Okay.
Linking with that.
Yeah.
Promoting bazaars.
Well, actually, what you have here, what we experienced here, I think for 3.5 days, is that very spirit which I historically find is intrinsic to why the bazaar happened. Humans have had a natural need to gather. And I think first of all we gathered for the sake of gathering, for festivity, for conversation, for gossip, for politics, all that made culture, that created society as we know it today with family and parenting and all the structures. They came out of our need to gather. And because we gathered, it became convenient to also buy and sell. So, we've not come here to buy books or to buy a cup of coffee. But because we are here for another purpose, we are also buying food, buying books, buying a tote bag. And basically, I think a lot of what I've seen and heard here is along those tracks. That whether it's the community currency discussion, which I hope Ruby will tell us about later, or it is the whole discussion today on different business models. I couldn't get into the room, it was overflowing. There was one session in the morning, I know there have been several, but the one that I tried to go to was packed that, really thrilled me. There was so much interest in various kinds of, they were called non-growth business models. I look forward to reading the papers later online. And I'll close with just one example. When people say that, to help you distinguish what I mean by all commerce is not capitalism. In India, in every shop, in every town or city, we have examples of some manufacturer, single unit, maybe a family or even sometimes it's just a person, Usually it's a food item, but it need not always be. And every day or every week, he produces a fixed number of things, he or she. So, you know, if his pastries or what we call mithai, it's a sweet, if it sells out by 12 noon, he shuts the shop and goes home. Now, when you tell this story, I had a conversation with an executive from Pepsi recently, because, you know, when you have an argument, you try to have a conversation with the corporates, they always say that, well, you know, there's nothing else. What do you mean, another way of doing things? So I gave him this example, and he said, but that person is ignorant and stupid. Because clearly, there's a demand for what he manufactures, but he chooses to make only so much, and he's not hiring 10 other people so that he can have 20 times more production, and he can sell it till midnight. I said, well, that's a model. Why can't you accept that this person prefers to operate this way? And one last example, and then I'll close, because this is still a bit abstract. There's a friend of mine who works at a rural, well, it's a kind of a semi-rural urban, but it's a very small town in Maharashtra. He works at a hospital. So the owner of that hospital does angioplasties, you know, that's a procedure for the heart when there's a blockage. He does it at 1/4 what it costs in Bombay. So one of the big cardio surgeons from Bombay called him and complained that you're spoiling the market. People are going from Bombay to your place to get this done. And he said, well, you know, actually the truth is that this is what my market has decided. I am doing the procedure at a price that my local market has determined for me. And where's the problem? Because I own 2 Mercedes-Benz. So if it's spoiling your market, and you know, there's nothing I'm going to do about that. And I'll finally close by a story that maybe you all heard about, Linus Torvalds, who created the Linux system. So you know, when he goes to America and he's so famous and everything, even in the mid-90s, one reporter interviews him and is very frustrated with this whole commie-sounding ideology. The poor Linus keeps saying he's not a communist. And he says, but what are you going against making money? And Linus says, nothing at all. I make enough to put gas in my BMW. And the rest is history. 90% of the internet is today operated by open source.
Any immediate questions, reactions to Rajni? If not, then we move on to, okay,
Just a question, Rajni. I think, I totally agree with you, so this is building on it. Traditional bazaars were fantastic, but they were also, at least to some extent, built on relations of inequality. So how do you propose that when we revive bazaars or bazaar-like processes, that the issue of inequities be dealt with?
Absolutely, that's a very central question, because particularly in India, most of our, I didn't go into all that, by the way, there wasn't time, but if you, I'm so sorry, my phone is I promise you this is not my phone. It's my niece's phone and I don't know how to change the quality. I have to go home and find out why she has that tune on it. Yeah, equity is a very big issue, because the bulk of the bazaar spaces in India were run on reciprocal or how to say ये जो हमारे यहाँ था जजमानी system को क्या कहें? There's no English for it, but anyway, they were caste based. Okay, caste in the sense that all trades were a caste group, and there were very intricate interrelationships. I'm going to leave it to Pawan Gupta to say more about this, because he is our expert on it. But Ashish, the answer to your question is that as long as that the reinforcement at the macro and micro level is constant, that we are working towards new systems of equity, then I think we can maybe learn and operate from some of the core principles that were there. We should be able to cull out the reciprocity and mutuality that was there in those systems, and yet create forms of equity and dignity that conform to our sensibility, 21st century sensibility. But there's a condition here, that's why this is a bit of an internal Indian discourse. We will have to have a more multi-dimensional understanding of caste. I'm sorry, the Marxist and the traditional left understanding of caste is inaccurate, it is wrong, and that also needs to be challenged. So we will have to look at caste with not the 24, at least when we are trying to analytically understand it, not with the current sensibility, and then yes, we must work towards systems of equity that are completely rooted in current notions of what is, why when we say dignity for all, what do we mean? And it's tough, it's not going to be easy.
But there's no going back.
There's no going back, I keep saying that, yeah, there's only going forward. However, as in all times, there are, see, we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel philosophically. And so really when I say that we look more closely at the past, I mean it as a philosopher, not as a sociologist.